growth rates that I just touched on. This number assumes China will grow by 8% on average this decade. It will need to slow down to 7 to 7.5% in order to grow at 8% for the decade, because it's started so much stronger. The third thing to point out is if you look across this page, 8 of the 10 individual biggest contributors to global GDP growth are the 8 growth market economies, including Mexico. So Mexico is a lot more important for where the world goes than Greece. To follow on from that, and a very relevant thing in the context of Mexico now chairing the G20, here's a picture of what the world would look like by the end of this decade, so 8 3/4 years away from today, so this is on the horizon. And highly importantly in the context of world governance, hence why I made reference to the G20, the aggregate size of the growth market 8 is going to get pretty close to the G7. And the 4 BRIC countries themselves alone will definitely become bigger than the US. In fact, it will probably happen before 2015. And in my judgment, that means the changes that have started with the overhaul of the system of global governance, with the advent of the G20, and the beginning of changes in the voting rights of the IMF are just the beginning. And before this decade is over, we will have to see substantially bigger changes in order for our world governance mechanism and possibly our monetary system to accurately reflect the way the world has evolved. And it seems to me right now Mexico, as the chair of the G20, perhaps in fact because it's not one of the BRIC countries, is in a particularly good position to give some intellectual leadership and guidance on those matters. It would seem to me in this context, the future leadership of both the IMF and World Bank, certainly beyond the imminent changes that are going to happen at the World Bank, are not going to be a nice cosy deal between the US Treasury and the French Treasury and the German authorities in Berlin. It is going to have to involve some passing of the leadership role to somebody or more than one of people from the growth market economies themselves. And why not it be Mexico? In order to monitor the speed of these changes around the world as they happen, we follow something we call a Growth Environment Score, GES, and that's what you can see here for the 4 BRIC countries and the next 11. These 15 countries are about 2/3 of the world's population. And we look at 13 variables that we think are relevant for sustainable growth and productivity. 10 being exceptionally good, 0 being not so good. And what you can see here is that Mexico does reasonably well. Of the next 11 group, it is the 3rd highest scoring, and it's actually higher than 2 of the BRICS, albeit just behind both China and Brazil, but it's higher than some of the others. 2 other things to point out before I go forward. The change in red, or the red colouring, shows you the changes that have occurred over the past decade or so. And in the context of the strength of the true world economy, as opposed to a Western jaundiced, biased view of the world economy, that shows you that all these countries are doing things in the right direction. And given that they are 2/3 of the world's population, contrary to what most people write in the media in London and New York and the rest of Europe. The world is strengthening, not weakening, and I'll touch on that towards the end. Second thing to say is that Korea, of all of these countries, easily scores the highest. And let me flip forward to the next picture, which I apologise to those of you to my left. You probably find it difficult to see these, but I'm sure we can get these things to you. This is just now a presentation for the left-hand side of the room. These numbers list the different 13 variables that we believe are relevant for sustainable growth and productivity, and you can see where all of these countries fare relative to each other. And obviously for Mexico here you can see in particular where it does well and where it does not so well. But again, in the context of what I've just said a second ago, if you look at Korea's score at 7.5, Korea scores higher than every G7 country except Canada, including the United States, which, by the way, is another reason why, in that case, quite why people still refer to Korea as a developing country, I have no idea. But in sum, the reason why I emphasise this, if I were a policymaker in one of the other countries, I would look at why Korea's scores are so high and think about doing things to get my scores in the areas of weakness to be where theirs are. And I would guess that's going to deliver not just higher growth, but most importantly for your citizens, a better level of wealth. And if you look at the relationship between these GS scores and wealth, there is a very high correlation. We do this for about 180 countries around the world, and surprise, surprise, the countries with the highest GS scores are Scandinavian and Luxembourg. And it's no surprise in that regard, and I frequently say this to people from parts of Africa and the Middle East, Korea's scores coincide with Korea's GDP per head now going to $30,000, which is taking it to levels which 40 years ago Korea would not have dreamt it could get to when it was at the same levels as many African countries. And this is the way I believe to some degree Mexico should be thinking too. A couple of other quick things and then I'm going to stop. It isn't just in terms of things relevant for growth and GDP, but linked to it, the changes that are going on around the world are also affecting the interest rate and fixed income markets. And here, in a somewhat more slightly jovial sense, I have these two charts as who is actually fit for European Monetary Union. If you look at those countries from the West, here are the two core criteria of the Maastricht Treaty, which was supposed to allow these countries in and control them when they were in it. Now, in the reality, we meet here this morning, only 3 at best, probably only 2 countries that are already in EMU actually satisfy the criteria. Finland, Slovakia, and maybe one of the others, perhaps, if we're being generous, the Netherlands. If you extend that around the rest of the developed world, and if you introduced a rather silly game that any country could geographically locate and be in Europe so it could join EMU, Australia and Sweden are only the other ones that would do it. By contrast, look at our beautiful growth market world. 6, if not 7 of them, including Mexico, would walk in there tomorrow. Only India would be the one with any real question marks. India could go off with its own monetary union with Club Med. A couple of other things, and then I'll finish off with a comment about asset allocation, and I'll stop. It is wonderful, as I said at the start, that the UK is hosting jointly this event, because for post-crisis developed countries to do better